Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the brand panel. As Frank mentioned, my name is Brian Murphy. I'm the founder of the Alpine project. We help companies throughout the ad tech ecosystem create and implement their sustainability strategies following the internationally recognized standards, guidelines, and frameworks, and also getting third-party validation for every step on their path to net zero. And I am thrilled to have two amazing brands representing our conversation today. And the conversation is about building brands that are sustainable and profitable. And we've got iRobot, and we've got the Clorox company represented here by Jennie and Vivian today. And so what I'd like to do is ask Jennie and Vivian to introduce themselves. Tell us who you are, tell us what you do for the companies that you represent, but also in introducing yourselves, help us understand what sustainability means to your companies, because I think we all know what profitability means, but sustainability can mean different things to different organizations, and we'd love to hear more about that from you. Jennie?
Great, thanks, Brian. My name is Jennie Mucciarone. I am a digital media specialist at iRobot. I facilitate media planning and execution for the brand with a strong focus on programmatic strategy. And at iRobot, we invented the robot vacuum category. So clean, you could say, is in our DNA. And our robots are changing the world with what we call thoughtful intelligence. So for us, sustainability is really about continuing to innovate and elevate our products and their performance to ensure that we're having a positive impact on our community and also preserving and protecting our environment.
Good morning, everyone. Vivian Chang from Clorox. So I run the direct-to-consumer practice, and so we are standing up the e-commerce abilities to buy from brand.com for various brands within the portfolio. I didn't know this, but within Clorox Company, there are a lot of actually really sustainably minded, sustainably core brands such as Burt's Bees, Brita water filters, a lot of the different supplements brands as well, beyond the cleaning brand that everyone knows and loves. And so sustainability for us as a CPG company, I'd say, is primarily on the actual manufacturing process. What are we actually doing in terms of our packaging, our shipping and transportation costs? And so it's really actually exciting to be in this room with all of you to learn more on the digital media side of things. We're obviously spending and part of this whole ecosystem, but for us, sustainability, and we have a ton of initiatives around ESG that are really core to what we do. Clorox's purpose is actually champion people to be well and thrive every day, and so very much in line with the ethos of everything we're talking about around sustainability.
Great. So the first topic we want to dive into is setting targets and measurement. Obviously, to make progress against any kind of a broader objective, you have to start setting very specific and very measurable goals. And then you have to decide what are the metrics you're going to use to measure your progress against those goals. And we'll start with Vivian and Clorox, because you've set some pretty big, ambitious, and public goals and targets. Tell us a little bit about how the Clorox company sets some of its sustainability-related targets, and what are some of the ways in which you can measure your progress.
Sure. So one of the things that's actually really exciting being an employee of Clorox is the ambitious targets that we do set and regularly reviewing them. So on the kind of packaging side of things, our goal is reduce by 50% all virgin materials, plastic and fiber by 2025, 100% renewable, recyclable or compostable containers. And then on the more emission side, reducing, I'm going to have to look at notes to get the numbers right, reducing Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions of all of the products that we're manufacturing, as well as the usage of these products by 50% by 2030 versus the 2020 baseline, and then 25% on Scope 3. So pretty ambitious targets, and I think the the exciting part is these are not just things that are thrown out there. These are part of our what we review with investors, a very aggressive kind of board committee, as well as internal ESG council that is regularly making sure that we're using external vendors, third party, to measure our progress.
Great. Jennie, same question to you. Targets, measurement, and how you start to track progress?
Yeah, so iRobot is very committed to reducing our overall carbon footprint. Transparently, we don't have firm targets set in that regard just yet, but we are aware of all business processes, and we work to minimize our impact on the environment by improving workflows. And that really starts and ends with the standards that we set for supply chain, product design, manufacturing, all the way through to our global facilities. And of course now our marketing as well, which we're taking that into consideration.
For those of you not familiar with the Science-Based Targets Initiative, I think that's something that Vivian brought up. And for those of you not familiar with it, check it out. ScienceBasedTargets.org is basically a framework that was set back in October of 2021 that enables companies to set and then validate their net zero targets. How much you're going to reduce your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by what year. And what's interesting is you can see a directory of all the companies that have set their targets. And I know that iRobot is working towards setting its targets. Clorox has set their targets, so you can actually read all about them on their company directory. There's about 2,500 corporations that have done that so far, and there's more that are joining every day. Okay, so we got into some measurements, some targets. Let's talk about some of the big initiatives that some of your companies have put into action. Jennie, I know that there's been a lot of really cool things around rechargeable, renewable, and recyclable batteries, and I want to hear about vSlam for everybody, because this is, I think, a really interesting initiative at iRobot. But tell us more about some of the things that you're actually doing to drive forward some of your sustainability objectives.
Yeah, so I'll start from a product standpoint, because our flagship Roomba robot vacuum was really designed with overall energy efficiency in mind. And there are several things that make that possible. One, Brian just mentioned, vSlam technology, which is our proprietary digital mapping feature. So that allows the robot to learn your home and then clean in neat rows as efficiently and as quickly as possible. That also comes with a recharge and resume feature, which allows the robot to pause its mission if it's low on battery, return to the dock to charge up, and then return to that exact spot that it had stopped at to resume and finish its cleaning. So both of these features actually make a Roomba robot vacuum more energy efficient and more efficient at cleaning your home than a typical standing or handheld vac. And I will also say every robot sits on a dock when not cleaning. That dock is always plugged in to ensure Wi-Fi and internet connectivity. However, it's only actively pulling power when the robot needs charge. So again, just another thoughtful design from our product design team that allows energy efficiency and also, of course, cleaning efficiency.
Do you think that when those products are being engineered, is the objective, let's make it as efficient as possible, but also let's think about ways to have its environmental impact be reduced? I mean, efficiency and sustainability often go hand in hand. Are the people designing and developing products at iRobot thinking about that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's this common misconception that sustainability and profitability are competing agendas, which isn't true. I think innovation often stems from being sustainable and drives disruption in categories. So our engineers are always thinking about that, and I think that's what sets us apart and makes us a leader in the category. And then I could also hit on some other initiatives at iRobot, including some robust recycling, restoration, and refurbishment programs. All of our product packaging is 93% paper-based and recyclable, and then we are always strongly encouraging battery and product end-of-life recycling. Some robot models have up to 97% total recyclability, which is pretty impressive. And we provide detailed instructions in every user manual to ensure that our customers have the information they need to responsibly dispose of unused or end-of-life cycle parts.
If anybody wants to see a great example of a company really taking charge with its corporate sustainability report, iRobot's report is really impressive. The 5 Ps: people, places, products, philanthropy, and what's the last one? I always forget that. But there were the 5 Ps. Go check it out. It's a really clearly laid out
Places.
report. Thank you. Places, offices, and how the different facilities can be more efficient and more sustainability. But a really great example of a company that's doing it the right way. Clorox, big initiatives happening there. What can you tell us about that, Vivian?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of things. There are brands, so I'll talk Burt's Bees, for example, where the whole core is about natural and sustainable. It was natural before natural was in, essentially. And so that brand is leading the charge in a lot of ways. All of the packaging is already 100% recyclable. We're introducing a lot of new products that are in paper tubes, for example, so avoiding plastics altogether. And also looking at the sourcing. So 99.6% of ingredients are natural origin sourced. Actually working with a lot of the local communities, for example, for shea butter, and really empowering those communities as well. And so we really do think about the supply chain from as far back as we can, just knowing the footprint that we have. And even things like the face wipes at Burt's. One thing that I learned recently is those are made 60% from cotton byproduct of making T-shirts. And so, what are industries that we can kind of partner with and help them also generate less waste? I was just in the Durham offices of Burt's Bees this week. You go in and the bins are not just recycling and trash, it's recycle, compost, paper, waste to energy. It is truly really down to even how the office functions. So I think that's an interesting and fun example for along initiatives. The other is Clorox bleach, really on R&D. So a lot of our CPG and brands, both Glad trash bags and also cleaning, it's about how do we make things more concentrated? How do we decrease the amount of product in that way? And so one of the stats that really hit me hard was over the last couple years, the actual Clorox bleach product is now 25% more concentrated. That has resulted in 15 million pounds of plastic reduced and 7 million pounds of paper from shipping reduced, right? So that, to me, just brings home the amount of impact that we can have across the supply chain if we really focus on R&D and innovation in that way. So those are the types of initiatives that we're really going after. And it really is every single GM, every single business unit is trying to think in ways that are innovative along these lines.
Can you talk about that a little bit more, Vivian? You mentioned some of the Clorox brands. You mentioned Glad. You mentioned Clorox wipes. You mentioned Burt's Bees. How much autonomy do each of those brand managers and business owners have when it comes to developing and implementing their sustainability strategies versus how much of it is coming from the corporate level?
So the targets are set corporately, but it really is up to the business units for how to deliver against those. Of course, there's going to be shared learnings on innovation on R&D, but it is pretty unique because all of the different categories we play in are distinct from each other.
Great. So shifting gears, we are at the Green Media Summit, and we have to talk about the subject of media, advertising, marketing, and the media supply chain. Because there is all sorts of new developments and initiatives being rolled out to help us understand and become more aware of the impact that our industry, ad tech, and the media supply chain has on the environment. And Jennie, you've done some interesting things in this area on behalf of iRobot, and I believe one of the first companies to ever launch green media products. Can you tell us a bit more about how that all came about and how's it going so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thrilled to pioneer iRobot's first ever green media product in partnership with Sharethrough, and executed masterfully by our Digitas team as well. And what we found over the course of our roughly 3-month campaign is that green media is highly correlated with performant media, and it makes sense from a programmatic supply chain standpoint when you think about all the waste and inefficiency and duplication that exists within the bid stream a lot of the time, results in high carbon and just an inefficient way of working. So, the data that we received powered by Scope 3 has shed light on a lot of those inefficiencies and allowed us to optimize accordingly. And that data is so valuable for a few reasons. First being, it's the first time we can really see and visualize and conceptualize the impact that our digital investment is having on the environment. It's pretty eye-opening when you see the amount of flights from Boston to London or years of heating a home that came from a media campaign running for 3 months. And secondly, and most importantly, the data provided by Scope 3 in terms of carbon emissions is actionable. So we received a domain report, and what we can do looking at that is start to optimize and cut out the offenders and high carbon publishers and sites from our campaigns. And that will help us to reduce our overall footprint, but also influence change in the industry. So it allows us to almost take supply path optimization a level deeper, and it becomes carbon path optimization.
Are you able to compare and contrast those two KPIs? One KPI being the carbon emissions of a particular publisher or supply path, and then the other KPI being pure performance. I've seen some quadrants out there that basically say, hey, if you're a low performing and high emitting supply path / publisher, that's an easy thing to remove from a media buy. Is that sort of the way you're looking at it?
Exactly, and that's the ultimate goal. A lot of times high carbon inventory is made for advertising and not ideal for a user experience at all. So that's part of the incentive to optimize and cut those sites and domains out of the plan. And at iRobot, we're working on implementing sort of a green media roadmap. So at current, that consists of continuing to activate green media products where we can to offset the carbon from our digital investments, and then taking the data and the reporting that we receive to optimize and seek out green inventory. We can activate green pre-bid segments, which will just allow us to be more efficient across the board. And ultimately, where we would like to be is setting sustainability KPIs for media, and then incorporating those into our regular reporting cadence, and that will allow us to fully reduce our impact and our carbon emissions versus just offsetting with these one-off campaigns.
Great. I think iRobot is clearly a pioneer in the green media space, which is really exciting. Vivian, for the Clorox company, when we talk about Scope 3 emissions, there's a lot to unpack there, obviously. And for a company like Clorox, you've got manufacturing, distribution, logistics. Help us understand how the Clorox company is starting to look at its marketing and advertising and its media supply chain as one of the supply chains that would potentially be included in how it starts to see its Scope 3 emissions.
Yeah. It's a great question. Primarily what's in our Scope 3 right now is the product and services, and then the end of life and the usage of those. And so candidly, the digital media and advertising side of it is something that I don't think there's a ton of awareness on. And I think that's where it has to start. We were talking earlier that I think what drives change within these brands is either it's added value to consumers or consumers are demanding it, or there's a business benefit, improved efficiency, improved return on ad spend, or there's regulation involved. And so on supply chain, as we've talked about today, there's a lot of initiatives within Clorox, and I think I probably speak on behalf of a lot of big CPG kind of brands. And on the other side, when it comes to digital, I think it's asking for help from all of the folks in this room, right? We really do rely on the agency partners, and then from there, the DSPs and so forth to drive that change, but also help teach us how to think about it and how to take those baby steps forward. And so I think it's really just, it's not so much that we wouldn't want to set targets, but there's not a lot of that awareness today. And I think what I am excited about is this whole idea that your case study that they don't have to go, sustainability and business profit and business results don't have to move in the opposite direction. Like more of those examples are really what's going to, I think, move the needle to even enable tests. So, I'm excited to see, where we go from here.
Okay, AdTech, I think I heard a big call to action there from one of the world's biggest brands. Let's drive awareness and let's drive education and let's try to bring the concept of green media right in front of some of the biggest brands in the world like Clorox. That was great. Thanks, Vivian. So we got another topic to dive into, which is a really important component of any sustainability journey, which is stakeholder communication. How do you take the goals that you've set, the progress that you've made, the initiatives that you've implemented, and make sure that your stakeholders are aware of them. Stakeholders being internal stakeholders like your employees, but external stakeholders like your clients and partners. How do you make sure that you are properly getting the word out so that people understand what you're working on and that there's validity to it and authenticity to it? I'll start with you, Jennie, because iRobot's been very public about a lot of the initiatives that it's put out through its reports and a lot of the information that's readily available on its website. But tell us a bit more about how iRobot tackles the issue of stakeholder communication.
Yeah, to your point, Brian, I think that starts with our annual corporate social responsibility report, which not only gives information to our stakeholders and the public, but holds our company accountable as well. In addition to that, we have an internal sustainability group for employees where we're keeping each other up to date on progress of the business and product design and things that are happening internally. And then most importantly, I think, is keeping our consumers aware of our latest offerings in terms of recycling, refurbishment, and restoration, and making sure that we're continuing to evolve those offerings for them as well.
And how about at the Clorox company, Vivian? What are your thoughts on tackling the issue of stakeholder communication?
Right. There's certainly a lot communicated to the investment community, and we have regular reports against it. I'd say the other part of it, though, is also internal. So our regular internal town halls, we will talk about what are we doing around these sustainability initiatives. I'm not in a sustainability department or function, but I'm aware of these stats and what are we doing across the different business units. And I actually think that matters for making that progress, right? Leveraging every single person within the company towards that. And then there's also, we actually do have product campaigns. So we have one live right now within the Clorox that is the free and clear, so the compostable wipes that are safe around kids and pets. And so there is this idea now where marketing these sustainable products is actually also really good for business. It is, especially among the younger consumers who are who want to identify with sustainable brands, willing to even pay more for sustainable brands. I think that's a different angle on stakeholder communication, but it's bringing that awareness that we have this product line, that people can make choices with the actual dollars that they're spending day in and day out. And then the last piece, because we're pretty proud of it, is actually we were named the top most sustainable company by Barron's this year. And so you bet we are trying to call attention to that as much as we can, but that is also then a testament to the actual hard work that has been done behind the scenes.
So that brings up a really interesting point. You are taking the work that is being done by the Clorox company to be a more sustainable business, to produce, market, and distribute more sustainable products. but there's also business benefits from it. And this, remember, is a conversation about sustainability and profitability. Can you just maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Are there some examples where you can point to where the Clorox company's efforts around being a more sustainable business and making more sustainable products has helped actually drive the bottom line?
Yeah, there's, I'd say the existence of the Burt's Bees brand and the success of the brand itself is an example of that, right? And I think that actually the business impact is going to continue to grow as younger consumers are really demanding this. And so in some ways we made the choices just because it's the right thing to do. And then in others, it's really looking at the insights and what are consumer needs states and what are they asking for and developing innovation and products to meet that. And the Clorox Free and Clear wipes is an example of that. But I think there's a lot of ways of seeing value behind that, and I'm really personally excited for that.
Thank you, Vivian. Jennie, you talked about this a bit earlier, but making the iRobot and other products more energy efficient makes them more environmentally sustainable. That makes them a better product for business. Can you talk a little bit more about how that translates into bottom line business impacts and profitability?
Yeah, I think across the board, this is true for iRobot, but also other business leaders that incorporate sustainability and social good into their business strategies. Companies like Chipotle or GE, Warby Parker, they don't give their money to environmental and social efforts. That's how they earn their money because it's built into their business strategy and incorporated already. So I think it's this delicate balance of innovating and making sure that you're not just releasing a CSR report and saying that you're doing these things, but actually building it into your overall business model.
Excellent, thank you. So our last question to both of you is, we have a room full of brands, agencies, ad tech platforms, and publishers that came here today, as Frank mentioned earlier, for a bunch of reasons, not least of which is education and learning. You've both had the opportunity to learn on your own respective journeys. Vivian, starting with you, what advice can you give our audience about how to build a more sustainable and profitable brand?
It really, I think it starts with that awareness and measurement side of it, right? And so, in a way, I already said, it's a call for help to help educate us on areas that may be a bit of a blind spot. But I think it really is that, right? Having the internal conversation, talking to consumers or talking to your constituents on what matters. And I think sustainability will increasingly be one of those things that folks are asking for.
Jennie?
Yeah, I would say what gets measured usually gets managed. And now in the digital advertising ecosystem, we have the tools available to us thanks to what Scope 3 and Sharethrough are doing to measure the impact that our dollars are having. And I think no contribution is too small. So I would encourage everyone to do your own research, get familiar with what's happening in the industry, and figure out ways that you can affect change in your own company. And then I would just say there's no business case for no life on Earth. So we should all think about that. It's pretty staggering to think of it in that way, and maybe a little bit pessimistic, but I think it's time for change, and it's time for us all to recognize that and affect change wherever we can.
And for those of you taking notes, I think what gets measured gets managed is definitely a great takeaway from this conversation. Vivian, Jennie, thank you so much for joining this great conversation. Thanks to all of you, and enjoy the rest of the show.